Even though the military naval strength was in the hands of Muslims, in the early period, trading by sea was generally not done by Muslims in the Mediterranean. In the Indian Ocean, Sinbad the sailor and so forth it was, but in the Mediterranean, the trading ships were largely in the hands of Christian Italians, Genoese and Venetians in most cases, sometimes also Pisans as well. And really the development of those cities as strong trading cities was made possible by the establishment of the Mediterranean as a single trading unit and the security provided by the caliphal navy. So in a sense, the beginning of the rise of Italy can be traced back not primarily to Rome, which had been completely shattered and fragmented by this time, but to the uniting of the Mediterranean as a peaceful trading space by the Arab military fleets. So these cities develop as trading powers, and they trade with Tunisia, also with Syria and Egypt. In the western areas of the Mediterranean, trade is usually in the hands of North African Jews. Now, this might seem strange. The Muslims are great traders in the Indian Ocean. They're great traders by land in Central Asia, up the Volga, trading with the Vikings, going through to Black Africa, East Africa. Mozambique, for instance, named after Musa bin Buraik, who was an early Arab trader who penetrated those coastlands. But when they went to Europe, usually the Arab traders didn't prosper, and generally they didn't like to go there, largely because Christian Europe didn't really have the willingness to provide an infrastructure for them. They could just about accommodate Jewish traders, but the presence of Muslims was just politically and religiously too much, which is one reason why Mediterranean trade, as opposed to trade elsewhere in the Islamic world, at this period is dominated by these Italians, because they are able to go to Muslim cities, whereas the Muslim merchants generally found it more difficult to go to the Christian cities. The nature of the goods carried in this period, pretty simple. Europe exported generally raw materials. It was like the third world of the 10th century, if you like, iron, timber and wool. And in exchange it would import consumer goods, finished textiles, carpets, jewellery and weapons. Turning to the other great area of Arab trading activity, the Indian Ocean, you will find that almost all of the long-distance traders in the Indian Ocean and around past Java to the South China Sea, almost all of them were Arabs, or a bit later Persians and sometimes Islamized merchants from Gujarat. So they go right down the coast of East Africa. I mentioned Mozambique, and the town of Keliman, which is in northern Mozambique, was established by Arab traders. And they're pushing all the way around the coasts of China. As far as we can tell, they never got to Japan. There's no evidence for that. And it was really the Indian Ocean that was of most interest, because those areas were much more prosperous than the northern coasts of the Mediterranean. You could get good finished goods from places like India and China, interesting spices from Southeast Asia. And it's in the Indian Ocean where the Arabs develop navigational methods that eventually are imported by them into the Mediterranean, which have a very significant impact on the development of European shipping and eventually makes possible the crossing of the Atlantic. The reason for this was that the big cargoes, big profit-making cargoes that were carried in the Indian Ocean necessitated big ships. So the Arab navigators developed something called the Lateen Sail. As far as we can see, it wasn't known previously. It's a kind of sail that's hoisted with a spar rather than the old system of having two spars and a kind of sail somewhere in the middle. It's a single spar, often with a jib at the end. And this enabled a ship really to tack properly and hence beat against the wind. So the old square rig, which really made tacking very difficult, particularly in areas of strong seasonal winds like the Indian Ocean, not such a problem in the Mediterranean, this massively increased the profitability of trade. The captain no longer had to heave to and wait for a couple of weeks if the wind was against him. He could still make progress. So the Arabs introduced the Lateen sail into the Mediterranean. And this triggers further innovations, usually by European shipwrights. And in due course, the large ocean-going ships which made possible the crossing of the Atlantic were developed. That Lateen sail, for instance, was used by the ships that carried Columbus to the New World. Sometimes it's asserted also that the compass was the invention of the Arabs. However, I don't think this has been really demonstrated. The present scholarly consensus seems to be that there was some kind of very basic magnetized needle used by some Arab seafarers in the Indian Ocean, but really the development of the compass into a reliable and usable tool can't be traced back earlier than about the 12th century, when it was really introduced by seafarers from the Italian republics. Another navigational aid introduced by Muslim sailors was what's known as the portolan sea chart. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it was certainly a huge navigational aid. A portolan chart is characterized by the fact that a large number of conspicuous points are marked on the map, and the compass points from that point and the bearing to particular destinations are marked. So it looks like a map crisscrossed with diagonal lines. Certainly this comes from the Islamic world, fully refined later on by Italian sailors. Now, through Muslim map making, medieval Europe acquired its first inklings about the distribution of the countries of the world. The Romans and the Greeks had had fairly faint ideas about the shape of countries beyond their political their political sway. And this continued in Europe, so that as late as the 12th century, somebody called William of Malmesbury still expressed the common belief that outside Europe the entire world was controlled by Muslims. This is a common medieval perception. Outside Christendom there's only Muslims. But a few decades later, this picture is changed at the initiative of a couple of Norman kings in Sicily. Sicily has been recaptured by Christendom by this time. And you have Roger II and William I. Roger II states 1127 to 54, William I 1154 to 1166. And these kings employ a scholar from Muslim Cordoba called Al-Idrisi, who dies in 1166, in order to tell them about the shape of the world. And he produces a book and a map, in part based on his own very extensive journeyings, which it seems had stretched from Asia to the eastern coast of England. And he produces a series of 70 maps, which together are known as the Book of Roger, Europe's first proper book of geography. Kitab Roger, it's really all in Arabic.